Recording. Hello, Renae. How are you?
I am good. I am good. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. I was looking at what you were doing, and this is and I'll get into it, but this is something I've touched on before, but I feel like this is like the new era for women in business, what you're doing. So I'm super excited to have you here to have this conversation, because I think it's going to be really inspiring for all the women tuning in, especially moms. We go through a lot in our cycle. So Renae Fieck is a cycle-based business coach, meaning your female cycle.
Mhm.
And she is, your program's called Your Cycle Advantage. And I would love if you could just start us off by taking us through a little bit your origins. Where did you come from? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I would love to. So, I am an occupational therapist by trade. And so I had this vision and this dream to work at the children's hospital like all along, and finally got to that place. And I got a job. I got like landed a job at the hospital, got diagnosed. Sorry, I'm like, my brain is a little foggy today. I think I'm coming down with a little head cold. But so then I got pregnant, and then my husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor, all in the same sort of window of time. So we had a year of life that was crazy and wild and full of lots of emergency visits, lots of 911 calls, like all these things. And in the midst of it, having three young kids at the same time. And so it really, when you've embraced a season of life like that, it really puts you in this place of questioning, is this what life is going to be like forever? Do I really feel like I'm living a life I fully love and I fully desire and I want to be creating? If tomorrow is the last day, which, when you're faced with situations like that, you start to wonder, if tomorrow was my last day, would I feel fulfilled? Would I feel like I lived this full life? And the question kept coming back like over and over. It wasn't. So that was the moment I was like, I'm going to create something new. And I started out trying to build a business through the network marketing space, and felt like I got to this place of a whole lot of hustle, right? Like there's this push and reach out to so many people and just keep doing this like cogwheel of repeated things over and over and over again. And I felt like no matter how hard I worked, I still wasn't getting the results I wanted. And when I went back to my coach or my upline and people, they would say, you just have to do more. I'm like, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of us as moms that are wanting to get into business to seek more freedom, to create something, we don't have the time to just be doing more hustling in the midst of it. And at the same time, if we are, then we're sacrificing something that really is at the core why we're doing it in the first place, right? We want to do it to spend more time with our family, to be able to be with them and be present. And now you're trading your 9 to 5 for a whole lot of hustling on the side. And it just, after a few years of doing that, realized like, this is not how I want to be doing this. This is not what I want to do. And became the question of, if I don't have more time, if I can't squeeze, if I need to squeeze in more, but I don't have the time to do more and I don't want to sacrifice more in my family, what do I do differently? And that was when I discovered that women are just different in terms of how we live our life and run our time than men. And many of the strategies I'd been taught, like cycle or like time blocking, like, the mapping things out, and all of these like time techniques of like whatever, they're very masculine. And most of the strategies I'd been taught were very masculine, and they were just really weren't working. And so when I switched and I started leaning into how my cycle actually affects my energy, it affects how well I feel, it impacts how energetic you are, it impacts how you think and you create and you focus, like all of these things. It felt like I went from this place of trying to shove a square peg in a round hole to now actually feeling like the puzzle pieces fit, and I was showing up magnetic and radiant and wonderful on those live presentations. I'll tell you today, I'm not feeling that way, but that's just because I think I'm fighting a head cold. But like, you go from this place of feeling magnetic and radiant to knowing exactly when that's going to be, and knowing when you're going to be in that writing flow state. And so you're not hitting writer's block. And literally, it transformed everything about how I was running my business. I got so much more done, so much faster. I felt so much more aligned, and at the same time felt like I had the permission to take a step back and to take time off and not feel like I was hustling all the time. And it changed the game in so many ways. And so I started teaching it to my clients at the time, just in terms of like how you manage mom life and how you feel every day. And how do we know when you're going to be full of doubt and fear and you're going to feel super triggered by the kids, leaving their socks at the front door, whereas 2 weeks ago you would have just picked it up and thrown it in the laundry bin, like all of those types of things. And so many of my clients were like, more women need to know about this. Like, why have we never been taught this before? Nobody's talking about this. Like, we see this, our cycles are this horrible thing that we try to get rid of with birth control, or we try to avoid, or we'd love to be like men and not have one. And instead seeing it as this massive superpower. And so that's when I sort of transitioned and pivoted to where I am now, really helping women, particularly in business, leverage that, really use it as an asset and not necessarily just this hindrance thing that we have to put up with or push through or push past certain times of the month.
I love that reframe. Your cycle as your superpower.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic, because it's indeed, it's such a huge shame thing. Or I can tell you, where I live in Costa Rica, just a random thing, maybe too much. There's no tampons available.
Yeah.
Like, you can't find them. And so like you're like, crap, what the hell am I supposed to do when I go swimming like every single day? Right. But that sort of things. And there's a lot of beautiful women's circles here, a lot of spirituality. So I started also getting more in tune with, oh, we actually are aligned with like the moon, that there are different phases that we go through. I'm starting to tune into myself more. But that has taken, like, I'm getting to 40 and I'm like, indeed, what if I had known this? Because I had, cycles from when I was like almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
Like, what if I had known this and could leverage this for like 30 years? So I think you've tapped into something like incredible. And I just think it's such a fantastic journey, like from occupational therapist with like this crazy period in your life where like you're pregnant and your husband had a brain tumor and going through this whole transition, and then getting into cycle-based business coaching, right? After your network marketing in the middle and that hustle. Yeah. Oh, when you were saying that, I was like, indeed, like no one, not a single mom that I know, goes into their own business to work harder and to work more. And yet, ironically, that's what a lot of us end up doing, because the 9 to 5 you can switch off.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But when you have your own business and there's 20 different hats, there's always stuff to do. And then you've got like just even more pressure, right? Especially if things aren't going like, or in the startup phase, or in any, you've got the feast and famine cycles. So there's all sorts of things. And then you factor your cycle into that, and it's just a shit show probably, right? So I can imagine that your clients get this sense of relief when you come in like, oh,
yep.
And like exactly what you said, I can take a step back. Like I know when I'm going to be on top of my game and I'm going to be on fire. And I can also have permission, that permission that we don't give ourselves, permission to take a step back and just chill.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a huge difference when you start to go from this place of, it's not me. It's not what you're doing or something wrong with you. It's literally your biology. Right. So we hear lots of big names and motivational speakers and people like the Grant Cardones or the Gary V's of the world, or these very masculine figures that will talk a lot about pushing past your excuses. Just keep working harder. Like if you want something bad enough or your why is strong enough, none of this will matter. You'll stay up late, you'll get up early, you'll put in the grind, you'll do all of those things. And so for a lot of women, there are times of your month where you may feel 100% ready and on fire to do that. You feel motivated, you feel excited, your vision feels great, you feel wonderful, and you're like, I will stay up all night. Like, this feels so good. I'm in the flow, I'm in the zone. And then 2 weeks later, you're not wanting to do anything with your business. And you wonder if you want to crash and burn your business all the way down because this is not working for you. And why am I doing this? And this sucks. And I don't want to even show up on social media at all this week, but I need to because my business has to keep going. And we go through these cycles. And then that's when those fears and those thoughts come in, wondering, is this really, am I cut out for this? Like, can I really do this? Am I really capable? Or, maybe it's working for everybody else. Why are they able to stay consistent? Why are they able to keep up the momentum? And I just can't. And so there's a lot of this process inside of our heads that really, if we just flip the narrative and say, this is not you, this is just your body. So rather than trying to push through that and force yourself to keep up, it's this place of, okay, I'm going to just flip gears. I'm going to shift differently. I'm going to focus on these things right now and let the momentum and the energy and the high push come back in 2 weeks. But for now, this is where I need to focus. And it changes like even just the mental load that we carry on ourselves, like that even of itself changes so much. But then you start to feel like, oh my gosh, I get so much more done because you're now letting yourself recharge. You're letting yourself replenish, like a Tesla or even a car. Like I talk about the Tesla all the time because it's like plug in and I like the battery charge, but if you don't plug it in, it's not going to go anywhere. The battery, like a Tesla, goes so stinking fast. It goes from like 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
I know, we had one.
Yeah, but if you don't plug it in, it's
It
not
goes
going to go.
nowhere.
It's not going to go anywhere, right? And so why, as women, we think we can go on this like 0 to 60 all the time and never plug in? It's just kind of crazy, but that's part of what our society has taught us. We've been taught to just like keep going, keep it 60, keep it 60. And you can't sustain that. So your body, huh?
I want to piggyback on that
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
having the Tesla. We did this crazy road trip all the way to Italy. And so there's one, it's your environment and how that affects how your battery charges. Because I
yes.
drove it one time in the freezing cold and my battery just got drained so fast. So right,
Mm-hmm.
the environment. So if you're surrounding yourself, if you're thinking about like, hey, the people you surround yourself with, you're surrounding
Mm-hmm.
yourself with people who charge you up, or that super hard masculine energy, which I love that you tap into this because it's something always in the back of my brain. I'm like, they're not a parent, or they don't even they don't have a partner, they don't have kids, they can stay up all night. And not only are they men, but I was like, there's this thing about having kids and being a woman and breastfeeding and going through all that and the hormone shift and then feeling like completely drained. Oh, I woke up 3 times last night and my boys were up at 4:45 this morning, right?
Yeah.
And then getting the message, you should do more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just killer. But then coming back to the Tesla, right? So the environment you're creating yourself with, and we had this thing where we went down this crazy hill in Austria and we were cruising downhill and we were charging our battery.
Mm.
Like the car was charging itself up by cruising downhill. So I like, you should probably use that. And like, if you've got yourself
Yeah.
set up for success, that you're just cruising, then you can actually charge your battery while you're still making progress, while you're still making
Yes.
headway. So I love
Yeah.
that you bring that in. But what I want to come back to is also you're really normalizing, and I see that in your background, right? Like trusting your body, but you're
Mm-hmm.
normalizing listening to and trusting your body, and instead of forcing, being in flow.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is like listening. Because I mean, even then, too, like whether or not you have a cycle that's regular, or maybe you don't have a cycle, or, any woman has some variability in their cycle. And so your environment, just like you said, your environment, your habits, like your life, your seasons, like everything is impacting the way you show up. And so even I see sometimes like people doing that with cycle syncing their business or their life, is they come in with more of that masculine energy of, okay, here's days 1 through 7, here's days 7 through 14, here's like, this is exactly how I'm going to rigidly structure my life. And then when things don't go exactly that way, right? Like you've had a stressful season or right after Christmas and you're in like things, your life impacts your cycle just the same as your cycle impacts the way you feel. And so it's this very symbiotic relationship. And so really it is about coming back to this place of learning to trust yourself, regardless if it's your body or if it's your intuition or if it's, your gut or whatever it is. We've been taught and conditioned in society to look for everybody else with the answer. This is the expert over here. They are going to teach you what you need to know about business. Here's the expert that's going to teach you about what you need to do to lose weight. Here's the person over here that's teaching. And so we've been taught to seek all of our answers outside of ourselves, when in reality, every one of us is so unique, right? There's not going to be a one size fits all answer for every single person, nor is what I even tell you going to maybe necessarily work right now with your season or your life or your business or whatever. And so really it comes back to, how can you trust yourself? How can you trust your body? listen to those cues and know that there is no exact, predictable, exact strategy that works for every single person. It's like, it's the marrying of what's right for you and what's right for your business in your current season, and what's like the going strategy and rate or whatever, like not going rate, but like the going strategy. Like, how can you blend all of those things together and find your ideal business and your ideal lifestyle rather than what everybody else is claiming.
Well, and I can imagine that takes patience, right? Because it's an experimental
Mm-hmm.
process. You got to figure out these different times. And also, it's the same as when you have kids. Just when you think you've got them figured down, like you go into a new season or a new phase or something, and you've got to start again. So it's teaching
Yeah.
patience, it's teaching flexibility, and
Yep.
really like that I love the word trust. That was my word last year, but learning to just really tune in, trust, and I feel like there's a sense of overarching like peace and calm in what you're
Mm-hmm.
bringing in, meaning like
Mm-hmm.
away from the hustle, back to you, back to biology, take it as a process and be aware that things are going to change all the time, that you are
Yeah.
unique, right? This is also something I think we forget, and we try and mold ourselves, especially as businesswomen, like, because there are certain things that work better than others, and there are, like the Grant Cardones and the big gurus who teach certain ways of doing things, but how to find your own spin on that at your own time,
Mm-hmm.
your own pace for wherever you are in your business.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, and I think, I mean, it goes back to even like looking at, like, from a biology perspective, right? Like, we have different sensation or sensory systems. Most of us are aware of the five senses, but we actually have hidden senses inside of our body that most people don't know about. But one of them in particular is the interoceptors. And the interoceptors are your signals that tell you like whether or not, you've got a pain over there in your kidney, or you're hungry, or they're like the internal sensations. And if you look at, we've had a whole generation, like, I don't know about you, but I grew up with the, like, you eat all the food on your plate, right? You eat it all. There's starving kids in Africa. Don't throw away your food, right? So from a very early age, you're taught, don't listen to your cues. Eat all of the food that's portioned out for you on your plate. And
yeah,
so now, not to say that this is all of what's contributing
no,
to obesity epidemic in the United States, but now we have a whole generation of people that have been taught not to listen to their internal satiation cues. So if
yeah.
you don't listen to your internal satiation cues, you just keep eating, or you don't eat, or vice versa. Like, it's kind of this idea of like, society is not teaching you to listen to your body.
No,
it
not at
does
all.
it does require you said, going back to the idea of like, it takes and learning and experimentation, because you're basically retraining how to listen and what to listen for and what those signals are. And some of that time does take a little bit of time and learning and guidance to figure out, what is my body actually saying, like what is actually going on, and how do I lean into that.
Well, it's again, I love that because so much of what you say like triggers me. It's like I did this program a few years ago. It was called Outfit, and it was exactly about that, about resetting how we listen to our body's cues about hunger. So like the whole point of the program was to get back in touch with your body. And literally we were not to eat unless we were hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, figuring out, what does it hunger even feel like in my body? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? And like getting past all these societal things, like what if I go to a party and I'm not hungry? I remember going out to dinner with a friend and I wasn't hungry, and I sat there and ate nothing. And it was the most awkward thing in the world. And not to say that this program like changed everything, because it didn't change all the eating habits, but it really had a mental switch for me of like getting back in touch with my body. Like
Mm-hmm.
some people, and this is a parenting style too, like I'll feed my kids whenever they're hungry. I don't make them finish their food. I like to make sure they
Mm-hmm.
get a balance in, but I trust them to know their bodies. There's the
Yeah.
mechanism of every night at 9 o'clock at night, I want a banana. Then you start to notice there's like a habit in that. But again, like allowing our kids to trust ourselves. And again, what does my food on my plate have to do with the starving children in Africa? Like if you
I
think
know.
about it, zoom out, like one has nothing to do with the other. You cannot vacuum pack that food and send it over there and solve someone else's problem. So this guilt also that we get, like the
Yes.
guilt in food, but also I think that this translates over into like mom guilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're either guilty we're spending too much time on our business, or we're guilty we're spending too much time with our kids and not enough time on the business. It's always this, I feel like a delicate dance between,
Yeah.
do I stay full time with my kids? Do I go full time with my business? How do I balance everything? And I feel like, and this has played a lot in my own household as well, like, how do you find the
Mm-hmm.
right balance? And then you're adding in like, hey, you can add this extra layer to it to help you find, I feel like that what you're bringing in brings more peace in this whole process.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like looking at your whole month, right? We've been taught to look at a 24-hour day, and the 24-hour day is how men function in testosterone. So, testosterone starts really high in the morning, and then it has these up and down wave like patterns, and then it kind of tapers off in the evening. Men go to sleep, they get their full Tesla recharge, they wake up in the morning and they're ready to go, right? But women, we have estrogen in the first half of our month and progesterone in the second half. And how estrogen and progesterone impact you are very different. Like estrogen is that like hustle, get work done, feel motivated, feel full of energy, feel on top of the world. Whereas progesterone tends to have a little bit more of that. I want to pull back, I want to turn in, get more details. Like it can be very productive, but it's not this outward energy. So I oftentimes describe it as like your inner phase versus your outer phases, because it doesn't have this like, I want to push and be on social media. I don't want to be pushing out big projects, but you might feel like I want to clean out all of the downloads folder on my computer, or I want to clean out my desk, or I want to. So it can be very productive, but very different type of productivity. And so when we look at even like breaking it down into that, like your estrogen phase versus your progesterone phase, I had a client actually recently. She was asking me about cleaning her house. And she was like, when should I like clean my house? Like, I need to get these things done and whatever. And I want to focus on my family. Like that exact question you brought up in terms of we feel like we have to be doing all the things at the same time. Like, I want to be all in on my business and all in on my family at the same time, when really you can create balance. Like people say balance doesn't exist. And I'm an opposite of that. I do think that balance exists. I do not think balance at all times exists. But when we start to look at your season, we look at your month, and we look at all these things, you can create a balance, but the balance comes in the rhythm. It's not in I'm holding everything equal at the same time. It's that I give my attention here and then I let it go and I give my attention over here. And it's this balance. But for me, I have found this really great rhythm of when I'm in that estrogen dominant phase, that is when I am like work heavy. I don't worry about the laundry. I don't worry about so much of the like stuff around the household. I'm not cleaning. I'm like, I mean, definitely like keeping life afloat, right? Like I'm not letting my house turn to a massive pigsty, but I'm doing the bare minimum around my household. I'm doing the bare minimums in all of those different areas, giving my full attention, my full energy to my business.
Yeah.
When I hit that progesterone phase, I don't want to be putting a ton of stuff into my business. I don't want to be big creating. And so I use that time of how can I get my life in order? How can I help clean the house and get my dishes put together and like all these things that I need to get done, spend time with my family that are allowing me to feel recharged, recentered, put together, so that when I go back into that estrogen phase, I feel ready to hit the ground running. And I'm not sitting here trying to stare at my computer, getting stuff done with miles and miles of to-do list around my house ready to go. Right. So it's this balance of work life and then family time and work time. And there is a bleed between both of those, right? Like I'm not turning everything off. Like today I'm working. And then as soon as the kids come home from school, it's like baseball and soccer and basketball and all the things like mom life I'm doing. And same thing, I'm like not making them dinner because I'm that phase, but it's this like, where is my focus? Where's my intention? What's the primary thing I'm intending in this phase? And then letting it juggle back and forth, and then you can break all those phases down even more so, but that gives you a good overview of how that can play out in those two things.
Yeah, so the focus to create balance as well, right? And accepting
Yeah.
that it doesn't have to be balanced at all times, but if you zoom out a little and look at it over a period of time,
Mm-hmm.
that then, because that's exactly how I felt it several times, and I'm sure your clients felt like this too. If things are out of balance for too long,
Mm-hmm.
something shuts down, something stops working. That's when you get like the overwhelm, the burnouts, the depression, the feeling dissatisfied or lost in your life.
Yeah.
It's like, or completely disconnected from your family. If you're like, if the balance is like too much on the work side or on the health side, right? Like it
Yeah.
could be like, oh, I'm so busy taking care of everyone else and taking care of my business and hustling, that I'm sitting on my butt all day and not doing anything and not going out and getting a breath of fresh air even. It's not even about working out, but just like
Yes.
taking care of myself or preparing something nutritious or drinking enough water, right? Any of those areas, if they're out of balance for too long, right? Like, because things can shift. And I think that's what I'm taking out of this conversation as well, is that our life is seasons, our life is cycles. And that we can learn to flow with those cycles and also to just accept them, right? Instead of fighting, I think it's like those trout that are swimming upstream all the time, right? Like instead of like fighting against the current, like flowing with it.
Yeah.
You're gonna get a lot further.
It takes you so much farther. It takes you much faster and it feels easier, right? And to go back to that idea, like you said, of like when we're feeling like we're missing one. So your menstrual cycle is actually, I break it down into 4 phases, right? So I talked about like the inner and the outer. They compose 2 different parts and 2 different phases, but we have the menstrual phase, which I oftentimes call that the recharge, right? Like that's you plugging into your Tesla, recharging, filling up your battery. It doesn't mean completely rest. It means, what do you need to recharge and how can we set you up? It's your most intuitive time of the month. So it's a great time for you to take that pause. Like I oftentimes recommend off of social media for a couple days. Just let you listen to your body. Like your best time to listen is in that phase. Then you move into that accelerate phase, which is your get going, get things up off the ground phase, right? And then when estrogen's at its peak is when your body should be ovulating. That's your time. You're like magnetic to the world. You're like, make a baby with me. Come on, like, let's do this. So you are glowing, you feel radiant, you feel wonderful. Optimum time for any of your live trainings, podcasts, interviews, social media, all of that type of stuff. Then when that progesterone kicks in, I call it your reflect phase. It is your luteal phase. You're the most moody, irritable, self-doubt, but it's also a really great time to write content because you're super emotionally connected. Like you understand those pain points, you understand those core desires. Like it can be really, really powerful to like juicify and amplify your writing and your content in that phase. So it has a very strong productive sort of element to it too. And then you go through the whole thing again. When we look at those 4 phases, your menstrual phase gives you that core need, I think, that people need as to be able to tap into themselves and their higher power, right? Like whether it's God or yourself or whatever, like that is your time to really lean into that and tap into that deep knowing and that deep intuition. You move into that accelerate phase, and that is your time for feeling like full of purpose, like full of productivity, like you feel like you're putting something out in the world, like you feel like you're contributing as a human being to this like collective society. That connect phase is your core need of relationship and connection with other people. And then you move into that reflect phase, and it's your need for connection to self and what is right and true for you, right? And so I feel like when you have all 4 of those basic needs, people feel balanced, right? Going back to what you talked about, you feel fulfilled. And so when we look at those 4 needs, like the need for connection with a higher power, the need for connection or the need for putting something out and feeling purposeful, the need for relationship, and the need for deep knowing of ourselves, like that's what makes us feel fulfilled. That's what makes us feel great. And how wonderful that as women, we have a biological rhythm that creates the space for each one of those core needs to be met every single month, instead of feeling like we go months and months and months and we're like, shoot, I haven't talked to friends and I haven't done anything with anybody else in like 6 months from now. And like, I feel totally tapped out in that area. So like going back to what you said, when you live in that balance and you live in that rhythm, you do feel like you are getting enough balance of everything you core desire in your life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm like, my mind is like reeling. I'm like, oh, must know more, right? Like I'm like different sketches. I love it because I feel like exactly because this was the area I was interviewing you on as well, was on impact. And I can just feel like how arranging your life into the flow of, right, not like in a rigid days 1 through 7, 7 to 14, etc., but like tuning into that flow and recognizing, for example, like for me it was just a huge aha, like, oh yeah, that moody irritable phase is great content writing. Like that's not a logical conclusion that you get to. So like that that you can really create all that content and the social aspect and the lives and the, you know, even your client meetings, that sort of stuff, like in this beautiful flow that just makes your life so much easier. I can just imagine the impact that could have, especially I'm imagining that a lot of your clients are also moms, right? That you have all of this stuff going on, not just as a woman in your cycle, but like all these other little creatures going around, and heaven forbid when they get to the hormonal phase as well, like as women, then you've got a house full of like hormones.
I
But
got one almost there.
you're almost there. I have like my little girl is 2.5, but she's just entered a crazy tantrum phase. Like she was 2.5. And so I was like, I guess she's not hitting it. Oh, I had an hour-long tantrum last night just because she couldn't have a fourth portion of yogurt. You know, like it's fine. But that's like female male energy is already so fascinatingly different. But I want to look at like, I'm curious as to how some of the shifts that your clients go through, right? Like if you can, I would love to know like, hey, when you get your clients coming to you, like what are they typically like struggling with and how do they come out the other end? Because I'm imagining that's also reflective of the process that you went through yourself when you figured out how to align with your cycle.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that many of my clients come to me is that wrestle of I have these big goals, I have these big dreams, but I can't get to them because I don't have the time. I don't have the energy, or life happens, right? Like you have something planned and then like the kids get sick or the energy's not there. And they're feeling that mismatch between, you know, like having even like as women, right? As moms, we have finite amounts of time that we can work on our business. So you might be using a strategy like time blocking, where you put in a time on your calendar and you're like, gosh, this week I need to get all of these blog posts written. And then you get to that time and you are distracted and you can't focus, you can't get anything done. And then at the end of that time block, you're frustrated because this was your one chance to get something done in midst of all of life and handling kids, but you weren't super productive with that time and you can't figure out why. And really, that's where pulling in this element of the cycle, you know, if you have this 2-hour chunk this week and you're in that connect phase, then get those recordings done, get your videos for social media batched, get all of this stuff done, and know that if you're in that reflect phase, that is not the time to do that. It's going to take you 10 times as long. So it goes from this place of like recording, you know, a batch of 7 reels in 1 hour versus trying to force yourself to get one reel done and then retaking it and retaking it and retaking it because you feel like, oh, I didn't look very good. Oh, I said that funny. Oh, I couldn't get the words out straight. And it's like literally looking at that. Like, how can you go from this place of in that phase, knowing this is what I need to focus on? This is going to be my highest priorities right now in this phase, and getting it done. So I think that's a huge element that most of my clients start to notice. They actually start to be able to move forward on their goals. They're getting more things done and they feel more free to just do it their own way. I think that's, if you were to ask all of my clients, I think that word permission would be one of the number one biggest impacts that they've ever received from leaning into their cycle, is this permission to live and do things their own way. Permission to say no, right? When you're feeling like, I know this is not going to be my ideal time, I feel okay saying no to this and like setting those better boundaries. Or, you know, the permission to play and have fun when they should be being productive, or all these things. Like, I think the permission is the biggest one that has made a huge difference in them being able to scale their business and grow their business, get more stuff done, but feel that balance. I think overarching, that's probably the biggest transformation most of my clients leave with.
Permission.
Yeah.
I love it. Like, I feel like that word is just like resonating. I feel like we need to use that like every part of our life is like permission for different things. Like, you have permission to not do anything right now. You have permission to be a badass hustler, like, or not, right? Like, you have permission to be emotional and have a breakdown right now. That's okay as well, right? So I love that. And goals is a lot of what I work with as well. So I really love the nuance that you bring into this, because that's a lot of the things like I recognize that in my clients as well, like having those big dreams and not wanting to set goals because you've set them before and haven't made it, or the fear of success or the fear of failure that comes along the way, and just then like staying stuck because that's the like safe place instead. Whereas the moving is what's going to keep us energized as well, right? Seeing that progress towards your goals.
Yeah. And I think this is a whole other conversation we could go down forever and talk about, but I think the way that most of us have been taught to set goals doesn't work for women. Right.
No.
And coming from, I took an entire semester in grad school on writing goals because like as a therapist in the hospital, like you have to write goals that insurance is going to pay for. Like they want to know you're making progress. So the SMART goals, like I spent hours and hours and hours in writing goals like that. That does not work for women, right? Because you have these ebbs and flows, and then if you set a very rigid goal of like I'm going to hit 5 new clients this month, guess what? If you don't hit those 5 clients this month, your mind then goes, I'm a failure. Am I going to be able to do it again next month? And then so then you set yourself up for the next month being already at this place of, I didn't do it, am I going to be able to do it again? And so month after month and month, instead of creating this element of like, it's coming, it's in the future, it's there for me, I'm working on these habits right now, we start to continue to reinforce these thoughts of, it's not going to work, I can't do this. And so what I teach a lot of my clients is like, set those big, hairy, scary goals, then forget about them. Then you set your goals focusing on the process. Focus your goals on what you can control in this moment, and that feminine, like leaning into the feminine rhythms and things like that. Because when we focus on those bigger the bigger, hairy, scary goals, like they feel so out of control. And then we can, like I said, we continue to set ourselves up for believing that we're going to fail every single time. And
I feel like we're going to have a whole nother conversation about
that's
this.
that's where I said, like, I don't want to get into it, this whole big thing, but like, it really, I think the way we set up goals is not working for most women.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have a very different method. Actually, that's something I'm working on. I'm gonna bring out a whole different, it's a goal setting sort of camp. But it's a complete reframe though, and much more embracing that feminine energy and recognizing success along the way, breaking down the big, hairy, scary into like manageable steps, right? And building yourself up along the way, and not making your goal holy. Like that's the thing. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to shift.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you think about riverbeds and streams and how they change and they shift every season, they're a little bit different. So I think we don't take that into account. So I love the example. I can totally imagine just like a whole semester of like goal setting and SMART goal setting. So that makes me laugh because it happens a lot. And that's still the traditional way of goal setting, right? So all right, so like throw that sort of thing out of the window. If someone like wants to go into more of this, because I love this, I find it so inspiring. I feel like you're creating an incredible impact in other women in businesses' lives, and you've gone through an amazing process yourself. What sort of resource? It could be resources of your own, but like what resources would you recommend if people want to learn more about this?
Yeah. Well, I would say I have a 3-part guide that teaches you about how your cycle is actually impacting your life and business. So that would be the first one that I would recommend. That is, you can grab that at reneefieck.com/cyclesyncbiz, which I'm sure you have some link somewhere. The other thing I would definitely recommend, number one, whether there's a tracker, a cycle paper tracker in there. So whether or not you use that paper tracker or you use an app, I love Clue is the one that I oftentimes use. I know other clients have used other ones. The one thing I would recommend when you're looking for an app is to make sure that it's geared towards tracking other things than just your ovulation and period sorts of things, because you have more to you, right, than that. And if you're trying to get pregnant or you're trying not to get pregnant, those other apps are wonderful and great. But you want to have an app that's going to allow you to track energy, productivity, mood swings, digestion, all of these things. Everything in your body is regulated by your hormones, or like impacted by your hormones. So you want to be able to track these other things too. So I would definitely grab something like that. I think even going back to that idea of like, your body's unique. And so learning to listen to your body before you even necessarily like fill it in with all the other data and information that's out there. I think it would be really helpful for everybody to just like start with, how can I listen to me? And so I've actually been super surprised. Most women are not tracking their cycles. So you want to make sure that you're tracking your body and tracking your cycles. Menstruation is key. You want to always have that, but highly recommend tracking ovulation. That is definitely something most women are not doing. And those two pieces are going to give you great insight into then being able to take all the cycle syncing information that's out there, or what I teach and all that kind of stuff, and then infusing it into your business. But those are kind of primary steps to do that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And last thing, because I feel like this is kind of a natural segue to rounding off, like for the women who are kind of feeling stuck in their business right now, because you've been in business like 4 or 5 years, what is like a tip that you would give them to help get themselves like unstuck, remotivated, like to, because I've learned this as well, I'm sure you have, the only reason we're not going to make it is if we choose to give up on ourselves, right? Like most of us have all the tools to make a successful business. There's no reason that we shouldn't succeed, but we all hit those moments of the doubt, of the overwhelm, right? So what, if you were to look back like at the you starting off in business, or someone who's a little earlier in the process, like what tips would you give them to like help them move forward?
I think my number one tip would be something along the lines of like a win diary, or like a progress tracker. I know that for me, I tend to hesitate, or like my mind immediately oftentimes goes to the place of the gap between where I'm at and where I want to go. And so it finds that gap and it's like, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. That's where my default mode goes to. And even recently, I was looking through either Google Photos or something and found some old videos of me when I first started coaching, or when I was first starting to show up online, or when I was first, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like mortified. I'm like, I was so bad. It was so awful. Right. Like, but looking back in those moments, I didn't realize that. I was just like, I'm just showing up. Right. And so to see how far I've come was super like reinvigorating, essentially, to say like, look at, yeah, you in the moment, sometimes it feels like you're not going anywhere. Yeah. And sometimes it feels like you're not there yet, right? Like you get stuck in that feeling of like, I haven't hit my goals yet. I haven't seen the success I'm looking for yet. And so we focus on that, like, it's not happening. It's not happening. But we sometimes forget about all the steps that we've taken and all the progress that we've made along the way. And so whether it be a practice that you do like with your cycle, like every menstrual phase, you look back over the last month and you say like, what wins did I make? Or what progress did I make? Or if it's a yearly thing or something, some way that you have this element of bringing in a reflection on how far you've come and all the progress that you've done, and staying in that zone, because then I think it helps you see like, okay, I've taken all of these steps and look at how far I've come. And these people that I idolize out in the future, or the goals that I have, they've just taken more time. They've just done more steps. They've just done it longer, or they've just taken more progress moments and whatnot. And so you start to look at like, I'm doing it. It's just, I got to keep going and keep doing it more, versus that feeling of like, I've tried this so many times. I've been going for so long. Why is it not working?
Yeah, that's absolutely the reflection and tracking your wins.
Mm-hmm.
I love how aligned we are on those things. Amazing.
Yeah.
Renae, I think those are golden tips to like round off with. It feels like a very natural end here. Thank you so much for your time. It has been like, for me, I'm like, I think I've got like a page of notes here. I'm like, oh, I need to go research all this stuff. Like my inner nerd goes crazy. Amazing that you were here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I will share all of your links and stuff so that people can reach out and get in touch with you. And have an amazing day.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much.
Bye.